Lifeless Birth is the third full-length album from death metal band Necrot. This band, they started back in like 2011 or so. This was an Oakland sort of based conception as far as I understand, and it features folks who are involved in Mortuus and Vastum, and the fellow behind Carbonized Records is on drums. There's fairly well-known people who'd played in some bands and gotten noticed. That time when Oakland was featured a lot of the punk scene and the metal scene were becoming a thing. There were crust-influenced musicians coming out of the woodworks and making great metal records. You could tell they were fans of pure death metal, and they were there to play death metal, and they understood what it was. You know, of course, they were most reasonably lumped in with bands that started out at the same time. So Vastum is, of course, a reference you'll find in relation to their early work. Their first record was a bit different than that. If you point to a band like Rude, who started around the same time, they similarly were interested in creating something that was viably reminiscent of the old ways, in the same way that early Skeletal Remains was. This was the kind of band you wanted to continue to see cropping up in the early 2010s, because that realm hadn't been fully explored yet. That the last decade really exhausted a lot of those ideas and those sounds and the possibilities of it in terms of nostalgia. But a band like Necrot, they put a little fire to it on their first release back in 2017. Now, they had some demo tapes. I've covered that before in past releases. The big thing to say about Necrot here is that this might be their third album, and they have been around since 2010, but it does feel like they were just getting started with Mortal. They'd really come into their own skin. It was their own sort of voice and sound. It was their own ideal. They've built upon that, and the production values have taken that walk with them, essentially, over the last several years. If you're familiar with Mortal and you're a fan of that record, take a step kind of beyond that point and listen to a song from the new album and see how different that is for you. So my connection with this band really was made through Mortal. I liked that first record. I think I reviewed it kind of briefly when this site had sort of just started. I was such a fan of the packaging, the production values, everything that they built around that record to reinforce the songs. And I think the thing that was missing was more than just the rush of death metal riffs. And I think that the way that this record kind of course corrects in some respects is that they bring in a little bit more melody, a little bit more intentional construction of riffs, and the songwriting it almost seems, I don't want to say generic, but it's really straightforward. Like this is a record that's meant to be very readable. You hear them work in kind of an early at the gates feeling riff here and there on the opener, cut the chord. You hear the very moshable simplicity of the Drill the Skull single, and you feel like they're kind of covering all the bases here. They're the basics of what death metal is now, and their points of influence where they see they can grow are all very much bare naked and on display here. They haven't really obfuscated any of their communication, so it feels very direct, and it feels kind of basic. This feels like if you're just getting into death metal and you just need to get the idea nailed into your head exactly as it is, this is kind of an example of that. And I think that it almost threatens to be too basic. It almost threatens to be too simple in its presentation. And that's sort of, if you're in the weeds of or traditional death metal and you've heard it all, I think approaching a record like this, you can just say, oh, this is a pretty standard death metal album. And I think in that way, Necrot find a way to be an accessible death metal band without being cheap and without being trendy. And in that sense, they really have the essence worked into their own vernacular. They're kind of working on their own sound still. In that respect, it's a very professional, easily read, approachable, and enjoyable old school death metal album in their own style here on Lifeless Birth. And I don't think that it is strikingly original, and I don't think that it's something that should be measured in that way. Basically, if you're looking for just solid, pure death metal without any bullshit and with the right mindset, this is kind of that, and that's what Mortal was. That's what this is. In some ways, I enjoyed Mortal just for its more aggressive style. I would suggest there is substance here. I don't know if this is the best Necrot record. I don't find that it has been extremely memorable, although I would still buy it because I have the first two records and I enjoy the continuity between the three releases they put out so far. And not every song is a hit on this record, but the best ones that do hit are worth returning to. There is some repeatable value there. It's still a moderately high recommendation. The verdict is still a little bit out on this one for me. I don't think that it blew me away at any point at all, but kind of like the most recent Skeletal Remains record, they stick to what is not necessarily meat and potatoes death metal, but they've got the right mindset. They've kept it true in a lot of ways, and I appreciate that because it's something I can return to and respect. So go ahead and check that out for yourself. It releases today on April 12th, and read my review for more information and my thoughts, and go from there.